In this video, I'm going to look at the way in which writers use the language of persuasion, otherwise known as rhetoric, to achieve their goals. We're going to identify the top 9 techniques that are used and analyse how these are successful in influencing people to do what we want them to do. In order to influence us to do most things, a writer or a speaker has to make us want to do them of our own free will. We often hear it said on the TV that politicians have to win the hearts and minds of the people whom they want to vote for them. This may be a cliché, but the reason things become cliched is that they are generally found to be true. Winning hearts means that we have to engage people by getting them to feel what we want them to feel. And likewise, winning minds means that we have to convince people to believe what we want them to believe. If we are successful at both of these, then people are more likely to do what we want them to do. Advertisers use rhetorical devices in much the same way as politicians and activists. The American advertising pioneer St. Elmo Lewis said, "The mission of an advertisement is to attract a reader so that he will look at the advertisement and start to read it. Then to interest him so that he will continue to read it. Then to convince him so that when he has read it, he will believe it. If an advertisement contains these 3 qualities of success, it is a successful advertisement." So when you're faced with a persuasive text, which it is very possible you will be in English Language Paper 2 for a.k.a, Edexcel and WJEC, and English Language Paper 1 for OCR, you need to first work out what the writer wants their readers to do, and then you need to identify how they are making them feel and what they are making them believe, before then going on to analyse how the writer achieves all of this using rhetorical devices or language techniques. In order to make us believe what they want us to believe, writers need to build their credibility through establishing their authority to speak on this subject, satisfying us of their sincerity and authenticity, forging a sense of identification with us and developing rapport. In other words, do they know what they're talking about? Who are they? Are they for real? Why should we trust them? Why should we do what they say? How will doing what they want me to do make my life or the lives of others better? Number 1. Personal experience and/or information. An audience is much more likely to be persuaded by what a speaker is saying if they know they're speaking about something of which they have personal experience. Look for the singular first-person personal pronouns I, me, and my. Emma Watson, in a speech given to the United Nations on 20th September 2014 to launch an equality campaign entitled He for She, establishes her credibility and her authenticity by outlining her experiences of gender inequality as she grew up. I started questioning gender-based assumptions a long time ago. When I was 8, I was confused for being called bossy because I wanted to direct the plays that we put on for our parents, but the boys were not. She's basically saying here, this matters to me. I'm not just jumping on the bandwagon because I'm a celebrity. I've been aware of this since I was a small child. This affects me too. Personal information can help an audience understand where the speaker is coming from, and can also perhaps let the audience know that they are just like them in some way, for example, in their background or their values, etc. The civil rights activist Malcolm X, in a speech entitled The Ballot or the Bullet, given in Cleveland, Ohio on 3rd of April 1964, to persuade fellow African Americans to become politically active, satisfies his audience of his authenticity and forges a sense of identification with them by distancing himself from both the political establishment and the educated classes, through giving them personal information structured as a triad. I'm not a politician, not even a student of politics. In fact, I'm not a student of much of anything. He's basically saying here, you can trust me. I'm not a dishonest politician like them. I haven't learnt what I'm going to say to you today from books, but in the school of hard knocks, just like you. Number 2, direct address. The people in an audience are more likely to be persuaded if they feel as though the speaker is speaking to them as an individual. Look for the second person personal pronouns you, your, and yours. These help to build rapport, as each listener is more likely to pay attention if they feel a sense of engagement, connection, and empathy with the speaker. The civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., in his March on Washington speech on 28th of August 1963, otherwise known as I Have a Dream, uses direct address combined with emotive language to engage his audience and communicate his empathy by directly acknowledging the suffering of those in the crowd listening to him, as he discourages them from violent retaliation. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. He's basically saying here, I understand what you've been through and I feel your pain. I understand that you've been unfairly targeted and I don't blame you for feeling angry. But I encourage you to not seek retribution because you will attain a higher reward through being the bigger person. Number 3, use of the plural first person personal pronouns we, our, and ours. These help to build rapport as they give the audience a sense of belonging, togetherness, empowerment, and single purpose, as well as empathy with the speaker. Martin Luther King Jr., in his I Have a Dream speech, uses plural first person personal pronouns very effectively, in combination with epistrophe, to achieve all of these. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together. These personal pronouns can also be used to communicate unity and singleness of purpose to persuade the enemy of their power. The English suffragette Emmeline Pankhurst gave a speech in America in 1913 after fellow suffragette Emily Davis suffered fatal injuries after stepping in front of King George V's horse at the Epsom Derby. That is the way in which we women of England are doing. Human life for us is sacred, but we say if any life is to be sacrificed, it shall be ours. We won't do it ourselves, but we will put the enemy in the position where they will have to choose between giving us freedom or giving us death. Pankhurst successfully forges the single identity of we women of England, or half of its population, as a force to be reckoned with, who will continue a campaign of civil disobedience until they get what they are demanding, i.e. the vote. Number 4, rhetorical questions. Rhetorical questions differ from run-of-the-mill bog-standard direct questions in that they are not being asked for the purpose of acquiring information, i.e. they are not designed to elicit an answer that the speaker does not already know, but they are instead used to make a point. Sometimes the answer to the question will be obvious or heavily suggested, so it remains unsaid, but is still very much present in the listeners' minds. Malala Yousafzai, in her speech about the terrible state of human rights across the world, when she was just 16 years of age, uses a triad of rhetorical questions incorporating antithesis, just like this. Dear brothers and sisters, the so-called world of adults may understand it, but we children don't. Why is it that countries which we call strong are so powerful in creating wars, but so weak in bringing peace? Why is it that giving guns is so easy, but giving books is so hard? Why is it that making tanks is so easy, but building schools is so difficult? Here she's clearly suggesting that rich and powerful countries are merely hypocrites, who facilitate wars in other lands to keep them poor and weak, to maintain their own riches and power. Sometimes the speaker immediately supplies the answer, suggesting that the question was already in the listeners' minds. If we return to Malcolm X, he asks the rhetorical question, "Well, what does this mean?" which he immediately follows up with an explicit response, which incorporates antithesis. It means that when white people are evenly divided and black people have a block of votes of their own, it is left up to them to determine who's going to sit in the White House and who's going to be in the doghouse. This is a skillful way of signposting his argument to signal to his audience that he is reaching a conclusion. However they appear, rhetorical questions still have the result of engaging the listener as though a direct question has been asked, and makes them feel as though they are actively engaged in a dialogue, rather than being the passive recipients of a monologue. Number 5, emotive language. Emotive language is that which provokes an emotional response in those who hear it. In order to persuade people, you need to engage them emotionally, whether these are positive or negative emotions, or a mixture of both. Queen Elizabeth I, in her speech at Tilbury in 1588 to the English troops, as an invasion by the formidable Spanish Armada was expected imminently, uses emotive language in the form of a triad, in combination with antithesis, to rally the men in front of her. "I know I have the body but of a weak, feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." Her use of the emotive adjectives weak and feeble to describe her physical form as a woman contrasts with the emotive metaphors heart, meaning resoluteness of purpose, and stomach, meaning bravery, psychological qualities which she ascribes to kings or male monarchs, and fills the men with a patriotic fervour and a conviction that she is a worthy leader, as well as a belief that determination and moral courage are superior to physical strength, and that the ensuing battle is not a lost cause. Number 6, statistics. Statistics can come in the form of fractions, percentages, probabilities, or just simply figures. These make a speech persuasive because they appear to be substantiating an argument with facts, but the way in which they are presented often has an emotive purpose, i.e. to create an emotional response in the reader. In an essay on global water shortage, written by Stephen Emmett, head of computational science at Microsoft Research, published in 2013, he outlines how much water is consumed in the production of burgers. For example, it takes around 3,000 litres of water to produce a burger. In 2012, 5 billion burgers were consumed in the UK alone. That's 15 trillion litres of water on burgers, just in the UK. Here, the staggeringly large numbers, i.e. that it takes 3,000 litres of water to produce a single burger, and that 5 billion burgers were consumed in 1 year in a small country such as the UK, are designed to shock, as they are shown to be the tip of the iceberg when seen in their global context. In Malcolm X's The Ballot or the Bullet, he uses the same statistic of 22 million black people, presumably the size of the African American population at the time, in combination with emotive language to incite opposite emotions in his audience. He tells them that he is one of the 22 million black people who are victims of Americanism, one of the 22 million black people who are the victims of democracy, nothing but disguised hypocrisy. To first incite anger, indignation and despair in his audience. In the very next paragraph, however, he uses the same statistic to incite a sense of optimism and empowerment. These 22 million victims are waking up. Their eyes are coming open. They're beginning to see what they used only to look at. They're becoming politically mature. Statistics should always be approached with caution, as they can be manipulated to suggest whatever the speaker wants them to. Number 7, the rule of 3, also known as a triad. The rule of 3 is the principle that this number is far more pleasing on the ear and therefore more memorable than other numbers. 2 never quite feels enough and 4 is just too much. There's something quite satisfying about something having a beginning, a middle and an end. Queen Elizabeth I finishes her speech to the troops at Tilbury on 9th August 1588 with not one but 2 triads as she successfully rallies the men. Not doubting but by your obedience to my general, by your concord in the camp, and your valour in the field, we shall shortly have a famous victory over these enemies of my God, of my kingdom, and of my people. Here she uses these triads in combination with emotive language to remind the men of their expected obedience, concord or harmony, and valour or bravery, and to fire them up with the enthusiasm of crusaders and patriots, as she characterises the Spanish as enemies of my God, of my kingdom, and of my people. Not only are they threatening her right to be queen, but they are also embarking on a holy war, as well as attacking her subjects. Number 8, repetition. Repetition of key words and phrases provides continuity in speeches and reinforces the speaker's main ideas. We're going to take a quick look at 4 different types of repetition and the effects that these are designed to have on the listener. Don't worry if you can't remember the names. They come from the Greek, as most terminology to do with rhetoric does, and can be tricky to both pronounce and spell. It's far better to refer to it as repetition and then describe the form the repetition takes than to use the terminology inaccurately. Epizeuxis is the repetition of a word or phrase in immediate succession. In Prime Minister Tony Blair's speech on 23rd May 2001 at the launch of Labour's Education Manifesto, he says, "Our top priority was, is, and always will be education, education, education." Here, the epizeuxis, structured as a triad, powerfully persuades his audience of his party's commitment to and focus on this single issue. Anaphora. Anaphora is the repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of successive clauses. Writers not only use anaphora to create a sense of rhythm, which helps to keep readers engaged, but also to give a sense of momentum or a driving forward of the ideas in their speech. The Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, in his speech given to the House of Commons on 4th of June 1940, in which he warned of a possible invasion attempt by Nazi Germany, uses anaphora to persuade the MPs in front of him that Britain's attempt to fight this off would be unwavering. "We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." Note the way in which the places that we shall fight start far away, i.e. in France, and end at home, i.e. in the fields, in the streets, and the hills. Churchill draws his listeners along with him as he imagines the approach of the Nazis' invasion, but he assures them that the country shall not give up, even when the enemy is in the heart of our communities. Epistrophe. Epistrophe is the repetition of a word or phrase at the end of successive clauses. Writers not only use epistrophe to create a sense of rhythm which helps to keep readers engaged, but also to give a sense of an argument coming together, that all points perhaps lead to the same conclusion. The American president Abraham Lincoln, in the Gettysburg Address of 1863, uses epistrophe in combination with emotive language. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. To emphasise that democracy and self-determination is the foundation of the country. By repeating the people, by which he means American citizens at the end of each phrase, he is asserting that there will be no outside interests or intervention by foreign powers. Everything comes back to them. Members of the government will be Americans, elected by Americans to serve the interests of Americans. Polyptoton. Polyptoton is the repetition of words that have the same root but belong to different word classes, such as strong and strength, or different verb tenses such as tells and told. Writers use polyptoton for emphasis. Malcolm X uses polyptoton in his The Ballot or the Bullet speech when he says, "It isn't that time is running out, time has run out." Here he effectively communicates that it's not that we have little time, but rather that we have no time to hesitate. This is designed to make his audience feel under pressure, that it's too late to take any course of action other than the one he is to propose. Number 9. Antithesis. This is also known as contrasting pairs. Speakers use contrast to create an impact, and it can be used to make a choice between two courses of action appear stark, to give a vision of the future, either good or bad, or to make a sharp distinction between two groups of people, etc. The HIV/AIDS activist Mary Fisher, in her speech A Whisper of AIDS, which she gave at the Republican National Convention in Houston on 19th August 1992, uses antithesis to stress how easily the disease can spread. She says, "My call to the nation is a plea for awareness. If you believe you are safe, you are in danger." She uses the contrasting pair of safe and in danger to warn her audience that we are all at risk, even if we are not haemophiliac, gay or intravenous drug users. She effectively argues that complacency, i.e. a smug belief that we are safe because we are in monogamous heterosexual relationships, is the one key thing that will put us in danger, because the virus does not discriminate. It is not our identities that put us at risk, but our actions. Speechwriters, essayists and advertisers use a range of rhetorical devices, often in combination, to influence our emotions, our beliefs and our actions. Understanding how these work can not only help us become more effective writers, but can also make us more aware of how we ourselves may also be being manipulated. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature texts.